Wow, the Titans have signed running back Tony Pollard within the first hour of the legal tampering period on Monday morning. This is the Music City Audible. We're going to break down what this signing means for the Titans. Let's get to it. Oh, welcome everyone to this special emergency podcast edition of the Music City Audible. I'm Justin Graver. With me, as always, Justin Melo. And this episode is brought to you by Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville and Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville. And Justin, wow, among the first signings reported on Monday morning, you had DeAndre Swift going to the Bears. You had a couple of guys that are much lesser known returning to their teams. And then, wow, the Titans in the mix in the big running back market, signing Tony Pollard reportedly to a 3-year, $24 million deal. For my mental math nerds out there, that's $8 million average annual value. But we know this contract, these numbers are reported at the maximum value. We'll see what the guarantees are and what the real deal is here soon. But this is what we know for now. Justin, instant reaction to Tony Pollard becoming a Tennessee Titan.
I think it's a bit of a surprise, right? I mean, we thought, Titans, the legal tampering period is going to open. They're going to be in on offensive linemen. They're going to be in on wide receivers. They're going to be in on cornerbacks or safeties. And not that means they aren't, but the first thing they do is put pen to paper with the running back, right? Or they'll put pen to paper on Wednesday. But with Derrick Henry's replacement, essentially, right? This means Derrick Henry will not be returning to the Titans. That's noteworthy. I don't think any of us are shocked, but it's certainly worth mentioning. And it tells you they did this. They chased Pollard with a sense of conviction, right? Getting that deal done within the first hour of the legal tampering period open insinuates that was the plan from the get-go, right? That they were going to go out and be competitive for his market. There are things I like about it. There are things I don't like about it. I'll be honest with you. I think maybe before I get into some of that, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, it's just interesting because minutes before this signing was reported, Diana Rossini tweeted, "The Titans are expected to hop in on this second wave of running backs available. Per sources, they are not in on Derrick Henry. They checked out the DeAndre Swift market, but are holding off to muscle up on the offensive line and wide receiver positions." And then not 5 minutes later...
Bad info. Yeah, she got some bad info.
Which is really interesting, just that, the Titans are not... I think the most interesting part of this was the Titans are not in on Derrick Henry. And then the other interesting part of this was they want to muscle up on offensive line and wide receiver positions. She said they were holding off to do that. So A, was she given bad info all around? Or B, did the Titans sort of pivot to Tony Pollard, recognize, like you said, identify him as a target, find out what his value, what he's asking to be paid, say that works for us and go do it. And then with the offensive line and wide receiver part, obviously nothing's happened there yet. We're expecting them to make moves, especially on the offensive line. Are those coming, or does Tony Pollard, I don't think that it happens, but does Tony Pollard slow you down on that path? Because
no.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Yeah, especially, again, the DeAndre Swift, by the way, the contract's very comparable in Chicago. Yep. He also got like $824. The guarantees have already come out on that one. I think they were about 15 and a half. So I imagine this is going to be the same for Pollard. So effectively, this could be viewed as a 2-year, $15 million deal, and then we'll see, right? I imagine the cap charge immediately in 2024 is going to be like, $5 million, maybe less. So it's not going to impact them for making other moves. I'll go on a long ramble here because there are things I like and things I don't like about it.
Go for it.
First of all, go back a couple years ago, 2021, 2022, maybe specifically. This guy was in a timeshare with Ezekiel Elliott in Dallas. Always performed, right? Maximized his opportunities. Everyone in Dallas swore Ezekiel Elliott was holding him back. Being in a timeshare was holding him back. At the end of 2022, I think it was in the playoff game, he suffers a serious injury, right? I think it was a fractured fibula and a high ankle sprain that he needed to undergo surgery. That didn't stop the Cowboys from moving forward with him as their bell cow. In 2023, they cut Ezekiel Elliott, which was, I think, a foregone conclusion. But even more notably, perhaps, they didn't really pursue anyone else to pair with Tony Pollard, right? They drafted a guy late. Remember, it was like Deuce Vaughn, that story. They had like Rico Dowdle, but certainly they decided to move forward with Tony Pollard as a bell cow. And I think for me, we found out what I always suspected. I don't think he's that kind of guy. I don't think he's a bell cow, can handle that workload. And, credit him for rehabbing from the injury, stayed healthy essentially this whole year, played like a full season. That's big. But the numbers dipped significantly, right? Yes, he had his second consecutive 1,000-yard season, but he averaged a career low 4 yards per carry. And he scored, I think, 6 touchdowns, which was 3 less than he did in 2022. And mind you, in 2022, you're sharing that with Elliott, who's one of the best goal line backs in the league, right? So I think the numbers very disappointing this past year. Call it what it is. The career average, the touchdowns, everything was much lower. Now, I don't think the Cowboys have the dominant O-line that they had in past years, but it was also a lot better than what the Titans had or have right now, right? So those are some of the things that concern me about Tony Pollard. Now, here's what I like about it. As I said, he is at his best when he's in a timeshare, in my opinion. That's what it's going to be in Tennessee, right? He's not going to be carrying a heavy workload. He's going to be sharing that with Tyjae Spears. I like that both of them are very versatile. I believe Pollard had a career high number of targets in the passing game this year, and that's always been a part of his game, right? So the fact that you're not really tipping run or pass when either one is on the field, no, both of them can play in all 3 phases, and Pollard can pass protect as well, right? So I think, he's about 2 inches taller, 10 pounds heavier than Tyjae Spears. So I think he'll do some of that banging in between the tackles that maybe Spears isn't as effective as due to his size. So that's some of what I like about it. I worry about the year that he's coming off. I worry slightly about the injury from 2022 and maybe how that impacted him. Hopefully being a full year or 2 removed from it essentially will help him, going here into 2024. I thought the money was a little high.
Let me stop you there. We'll get to the money in a second. Let's keep talking about Pollard, the player, let me jump in. I want to say some things about his production. You mentioned the timeshare and everything, and it's true. His career low yards per carry, like you said, 4.0 in 2023. The 2 seasons prior to that, 2022, 5.2 yards per carry, 2021, 5.5 yards per carry.
Big difference.
That's a huge difference, but there's something interesting when you dive into the advanced stats here. Tony Pollard had a career high in 2023 in broken tackles in terms of on rushing attempts and in broken tackles on receptions. Now you'll throw back at me, well, of course he had more rushing attempts and he had more catches. So why wouldn't he have more broken tackles? Well, what if we look at the broken tackle per touch rate? In 2022, his last fully healthy season when he was splitting time with Ezekiel Elliott, he was averaging a broken tackle every 17 and a half carries. That's a fairly low rate of breaking tackles. This past season, when he was coming back from injury, not really at full strength till more than halfway through the season, he forced a broken tackle once every 13.2 carries. So 4.3 fewer carries per broken tackle. That is an improvement by a lot. And the next one will blow your mind. He had, in 2022, he had 39 receptions. He forced 2 broken tackles on 39 receptions in 2022.
Wow.
That's a broken tackle once every 19 and a half catches. In 2023, he had 55 catches, so 16 more. He had 14 broken tackles on receptions in 2023, 12 more. That's a broken tackle once every 3.9 receptions. So his ability to make guys miss, while you could attribute it to higher volume, it was actually more frequent as well. So there are some encouraging signs here, and I think the biggest one that you mentioned there was the ability to play both backs, Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard, in sort of equal roles, so that when Derrick Henry comes on the field on 1st and 2nd down, the team knows the defense knows it's either a run or a play action pass. And then you have like your designated goal line back in Derrick Henry, and then Tyjae Spears comes on the field for 3rd down. Those days are done. I think these 2 players are going to be fairly interchangeable. And Tony Pollard is also a veteran presence in the running back room. Now, he hasn't been in the league that long. This will be his 6th season. But a guy who has played in high-stakes games with the Cowboys, played in a high volume, high-octane offense with the Cowboys. So this was not on my radar at all. I did not think the Titans would go after Tony Pollard. Frankly, I didn't really think he was a fit next to Tyjae Spears because I kind of thought they maybe were too similar. But after diving into it and after being presented with this opinion of, not needing to tip hands, and Mike Herndon, our buddy, tweeted something similar. He said, that's an interesting running mate for Tyjae Spears. I was expecting them to go with a bigger body there, but Pollard has a ton of juice and is a weapon in the passing game as well. Think this tells you how the Brian Callahan and Titans new staff want to use their backs. And I think that's important because this is our first true indicator outside of words spoken at a press conference. This is our first true indicator of where the Titans offense is going, and the fact that it is probably going away from the ground and pound, try to run it 45 to 50 times a game and control the game that way, but instead use the pass as a weapon first, and with two backs that can catch well, that can run out of shotgun. And Tyjae Spears may be a littler dude, but he can run between the tackles pretty damn well. He had that game with 2 rushing touchdowns late in the year. I think that this actually, the more I think about it, and of course, the more I try to spin this in a positive way as a Titans fan, because I don't want to dislike this. But the more I think about it, the more I think they do fit together well. So that's Tony Pollard, the player on the field. You wanted to get into some of the contract numbers, and I think I'm going to agree with where you're going here. So as we said, 3-year, $24 million deal. Your thoughts on the contract?
I think it's a little high.
Yeah.
I didn't expect him. That's the type of thing I thought Derrick Henry might get, right? Like $8 million annual average salary. So my initial opinion is a little high. It's going to drive the market up on those guys. Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs. I mean, you got to think they're laughing, right? Like 11 million per, 12 million per. Like, what's the asking price on those guys now? But it is worth acknowledging.
You'd think it'd be around 12 million because that's what guys like Jacob and Barkley played under last year on the franchise tag. So you think it has to be somewhere close to like the starting point, at least for maybe not for Henry, but for the top guys like Barkley is probably 12 million a year, maybe a little less.
I think this essentially confirms it if Pollard and DeAndre Swift are getting 8 million per, right? I do think it's a little high, but again, the 2024 cap hit's what matters most. Once we get our hands on that, I imagine it's going to be low. We're talking maybe again, 5 million. It's not going to have a huge impact on what the Titans can do elsewhere across the offensive line and at wide receiver. And I will say, I think our brains are always a little slow to catch up to how much the salary cap is increasing.
True.
Right? Because we always go based off previous contracts when doing this, right? Well, how can Tony Pollard get 8 per when Joe Blow got 6 per last year, right?
Right.
The cap went up so much, as we know, went up significantly more than we thought it would. And sources, have kind of indicated to me, I've spoken to some people, it's going to soar next year as well, right? Like we're in for a pretty big increase on a yearly basis. So I do think part of that is our brains slowly catching up to that. But my initial reaction, admittedly, was that it was a little high.
Yeah, and I think it is probably a little high. But the other thing to keep in mind, aside from the rising cap, is that the Titans don't need to necessarily be thrifty with the money that they have to spend. And that doesn't mean they should go blow it all on overpaying players. But if you, like you said, have a conviction about a guy you think is going to be a good fit in your system, that you're going to be able to make a productive player out of, then it's okay to pay a little bit more maybe than what fans would have expected. And I think as fans, we often get caught up in this is a massive overpay. What are we doing? Why is our GM so dumb? Like whatever fans are going to react to when it comes to overpaying contracts. The other side of it is we need to wait. Because as we saw recently with the Mike Evans deal, the initial deal was reported as some huge number that's like, how is an old receiver getting this much money? And then the real figures come out and it's like, well, if this, and everything goes perfectly,
then he might records.
Then he might get that amount of money. And even then he'd have to play out the entire contract. So let's wait. We're recording this right after the fact that the report just came out that the Titans signed Pollard. So let's wait and see what the actual numbers are, which is going to take a couple of days. We may not get this info till like Friday because the actual contract's not going to be signed until Wednesday. And then it takes a couple of days to report all that information to the league before the sources, the insiders actually get that report out. So this is what we know now. I think our opinion of it, it's going to feel like a lot better deal in 5 days' time when we have the full figures of this contract.
Right. I agree. And the last point I want to make, I think, before we end this emergency pod is, I was going to make it earlier, but you look at those timeshare years, right, where he was averaging over 5 yards per carry, significantly better than this past year. I think the common theme for me, and again, it goes without saying because it was a timeshare, but I think he's at his most effective when you're in that like 130 to 150 carries range per season.
Yeah.
And that's what I think he's going to get in Tennessee. Because they're very excited about Tyjae Spears. They're going to keep riding him and keep developing him. This guy's not going to get 200 carries this year. I'd be shocked if he even hits 200, certainly. So that 130, 150, 160 range is where I expect him to land. And history indicates that's where he's at his freshest and his most effective.
And I want to ask you, as we wrap up this little emergency pod, we're going to do these every time a signing is reported for the Titans. We're going to do a 10 to 15 minute reaction here. This is the first one. We're taking a little bit longer maybe than we wanted to, but I do want to ask, How do you think this affects Tyjae Spears' role? Obviously, you're not going to ask either player to carry a 300 touch heavy workload. Who gets the start at the beginning of the year? Tyjae Spears is the incumbent? Is he the default? Are they going to battle it out in camp? Is it one of those situations where it doesn't really matter because they're going to alternate drives here and there? Like, how do you see them being used?
Option C is, I was waiting for you to even present it, or else I was going to say it. I don't think it really, who gets the first carry of the season, it doesn't matter, right? I think these guys are going to alternate a lot. I think I'm not so stunned by this as some other Titans fans might be, because I think the outcome is what I always expected it to be, is that Tyjae Spears isn't going to be a 3-down, every down bell cow for them. I think his workload, put it this way, I think it's going to increase a little bit compared to last season, because Tony Pollard's not going to handle as much as Derrick Henry handled. And even then, we saw at times Tyjae Spears replace Derrick Henry more than maybe we expect him to, especially when they were trailing and they went to the pass, and they were trailing a lot, in truth, right? So when they had to go to the passing game, it was all Tyjae Spears. So I think his workload increases a little bit this season as a sophomore, but ultimately, if you're like a fantasy football guy and you had all these crazy stocks and shares in Tyjae Spears, you're probably left a little disappointed by this, but I'm not surprised. Again, given his size, I think that the knee injury, although at Tulane, we didn't see that impact him at all this year, I do think it has to be, sort of front of mind, and you want to keep him fresh, and you want to have another guy that can come in and spell him. And Tony Pollard's obviously that kind of guy. So I'm not shocked. I think Spears' workload increases a little bit from last year to this year. But this was always the expected outcome for me, is that he's still going to essentially share the backfield. Maybe it's like a 60-40 split in Spears' favor.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I still think Spears will be the starter, but honestly, I'm not convinced of that. Like, I could see them wanting to keep Spears in the same kind of role he was in last year because he was really effective. The question is, can you get more out of the running game as a whole? And I think, depending on the speed, the pace the Titans offense plays with, the number of total plays they run and everything, like the Titans were a rather slow offense. They didn't run that many plays because they weren't great at extending drives. They didn't have a very good offense. Overall, I think the Titans' rushing attempts total for the season could still go down, even if they run, 20% more plays than they did last year, just because I think the passing game is going to be the focus. And I think that's, like I said at the beginning, that's the number one thing this signing tells us, is they are moving away from ground and pound, run, pass, to maybe pass, run, punt, but it won't be a whole lot of run, pass, punt with this iteration of the Titans offense under Brian Callahan. So there you have it. The first major signing for the Titans of the 2024 offseason is a running back. I don't think anyone probably would have expected that, but we will keep you posted with more moves as they come, so make sure you're subscribed to the Music City Audible podcast. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. And reminder, this episode is brought to you by Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville and Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville. Check them out if you are trying to get your drink on. All right, that's it, Justin.
Listen, nothing better than grabbing a beverage from Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville, especially during free agency. I don't know about you. I'm stuck at home here paying close attention to free agency. I'm in front of the TV. I'm in front of the laptop. I got my phone attached in one hand. In my other hand, I got a cold one that I purchased at Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville. So make sure you head over there. They got a massive walk-in beer fridge. It's amazing. If you're a beer connoisseur like I am, a bourbon connoisseur, you won't find a better selection than what you can find there at Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages. So hit up either one and get your drink of the week to follow along with free agency.
Yeah, and raise a glass. Toast to Tony Pollard joining the Titans. All right, that'll do it for this one. We'll be back as soon as the next signing is reported. We're going to hop on the mic and tape an emergency reaction pod. So make sure you're tuned in, subscribe to the Music City Audible, turn on the little bell notification so you get an alert when our next video comes out. Until then, y'all stay safe out there and tighten up.
A Broadway sports media production.